Okay, so we're more than in time. Now this is a very great opportunity to have a discussion with Lynn, who, as you know, is one of the leading artists in the field of arts and science, bridging the gap between the arts and science. For many, many decades, she has realized some phenomenal projects. And Lynn, if I may ask you first, before we start the discussion, if you could give us a brief overlook about what we are going to see in June when you come back to Basel. This is an exhibition, but it's not a fixed exhibition. It develops, it moves, right?
Yeah, well, I did a number of projects. One, over the years, like the first computer-based artwork ever, the first touchscreen ever, I did the first AI artwork in 1995, the first talking AI in 2001, when it was 12 years before Siri, but mine's smarter. So it is. And I do it mainly without funding, with just programmers in the Bay Area who are out of work and want to do something interesting. So I had made a couple films. One was about an artist who had been arrested for bioterrorism. And the film I made, which actually premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, got him released from a 23-year sentence. And then I made another film on the history of the feminist movement in America, about the history of censorship in America. And that was, again, the only time that this had ever been told. So after I finished that, and I knew these two were really important cultural elements, I started to think about what was important going on around 2012 in the world. And that led me to understanding that the genome was programmed, and that would have enormous ramifications globally, for what life means for the future and what sustainability of life and the planet would be. So I started just doing my own research at that time, and I started by just going to interview people who I felt were doing the most relevant and innovative work in the field. So I started with Anthony Atala at Wake Forest, who developed the first bioprinter, and why he did that, and how it developed, and what happened to the patient who was 7 years old when he got the first bioprinted bladder. And then, I subsequently did other interviews at Stanford, at UC San Francisco. I did Elizabeth Blackburn 2 years before she got her Nobel. She identified the telomere. The reason she let me interview her was because I had made a film about Ada Lovelace, and she said they showed that in her science class. So I was able to get that entrance. I tried for 4.5 years to do George Church at Harvard, and I just was able to in January. He said, I have 30 minutes between March 23rd, between 3 and 3:30, you can come. So consequently, I have over 20 of these interviews that I've done over, since about 2012, which really taught me what was going on in the field. And because I have, my families are all scientists, I was able to converse with them so that they took seriously the conversations and have many hours of the conversation. So then I started in 2014 to put the first element of what I call the Infinity Engine, which is a replication of a genetics lab. And when I first did it, it had 3 rooms, about 3 or 4 rooms, and plus a reverse engineered facial recognition system that would predict your genetic structure. And from that, every time the piece showed, I added a room, depending on what the research I was doing was. So, now I just showed it 6 weeks ago in Santa Fe, and it had about 6 rooms. It has room for bioprinting, wallpaper of all the of many of the species of life that have been created in the past 6 years. The first Anthony Atala printed out a bioprinted nose for the exhibition. We have a GMO fish. I have a room, ethics room, that has all the court cases and lawsuits that have taken place over ownership of gene patenting that people could look at. I have, when you walk in, one room is a projected genetics lab that you walk through. The other room is mirrors, so it becomes an infinity station that you walk through. Let's see, I'm trying to think of some of the other. I have one room with, the last room was just George Church, the interview I did with him, and the conversion of things like film to DNA, which they were able to do with the Malaise film. Malaise tried to destroy everything he ever made because he didn't like his work, and they were able to find Voyage to the Moon, which was a 1903 film, and they worked with Microsoft and Technicolor to develop a way of archiving that film, reconstructing it, and it is in perfect resolution. You play it with a regular projector right from the DNA conversion, and you don't know. You know, it looks exactly like film. Trying to think. Then I was at Novartis yesterday, so I'll probably be doing a room on antibodies, and I also have a forensic criminologist that's going to scrub out a room, and I'll have a room with the invisible traces of living things. And then the final piece that I'll do in this whole system, which will be 8 rooms, will be a conversion of everything I've done, except for the video files. But everything I've done, all the texts, I mean, the translations of the video files, all the photographs, all the posters, all the projections, put into DNA. And so you go into this one room that will be almost empty, except for a lighted place where, like, the head of a pin is, and that will be the everything that you've just been through. And again, it's very expensive. It costs $10,000 for 20 seconds of to convert these files to DNA. But I'm going to be able to not do much film, but I think in the 20 second 40 megs that I have, I can do a lot to prove the point, and to also not use this archival method for archiving, but actually to create it as a media source for the future.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to open up the discussion. What is your role as an artist in this connection between the arts and the science? What is your role? What is your goal? Why do you get involved with science?
Because it's interesting. I mean, I think artists need to use the tools of their time. These are the tools of the time. I also live in the Bay Area, where you breathe technology. You breathe these ideas. If I was living in New York, I never would have done this kind of work. But it's in the air. It's in the atmosphere there. So I think if you're an artist, people say I predict the future, but I really just pay attention to the present. And these things, are going on, but most people don't know it for a few decades. So it's converting the tools of our time into some poetic experience that talks about our time, and particularly talks about the identity of the world that we live in, and the identity of life that's very quickly losing its identity.
Mm-hmm. And do you judge and interpret, or do you raise questions, or what is?
Well, you have to go to the Infinity Engine and look at it.
Yeah, I was wondering, what are the major insights? Maybe, I know it's an open-ended question, maybe, that you got from all these interviews in terms of the impact, maybe, of this cutting-edge science on society.
Well, I mean, I think it's really, now that I've been doing this for a few years, I see how really critical it is to understand what it's doing to life forms. I learned, for instance, about epigenetics and the idea of operating on trauma in embryos prior to birth. So the real shifts of what we could do to improve, possibly to improve life forms that potentially would, humans that would be born with predilection towards certain illnesses, and also with the history of a trauma that maybe their grandparents had, or four grandparents back had, that transferred to them, and they can identify these things. So it's like doing away with things that make us less, with things that interfere with our potential of what we could be as human beings. And also, I think that a lot of this research is happening because we polluted the planet. I mean, nobody's really said that, but like some of the things that they're crossing, new species that become stronger, is to I think support themselves in a planet that is so sick.
So, but then your role, you don't see yourself completely neutral, right? You want to raise awareness to those facts, or?
I think that I'm neutral because I don't think technology is utopian or dystopian. I think it's what a culture does, and it's apt that it's called the culture, because the culture can take these elements and do what they want with them.
But you have a certain judgment about the state right now. You have given one, for instance, right? You say like there's grief, or there's
that's my personal. I don't say that in the art. In the art, people go. It's a sense of discovery. Whether you're walking through a mirrored room and see yourself distorted and infinite, or you see this wallpaper and see what it's made, and or look at the bioprinting and posters, even just posters, looking at posters that are on the wall, what they tell about us. So, and most people have never experienced this, in an art museum. So they.
What in particular do you mean? Like what experience? What not?
Anything dealing with science or genetics.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's not a boring presentation, because it has all kinds of imagery and things that guide you through it, and the installations are well thought out. I have to think out how I'm going to do the last ones now, but so it's the first time for most people that they've even know about this. So.
What is the reaction normally of people?
It's been over the top. I've got probably 40 reviews on these, even from science magazines. So, yeah. But you don't know whether something's going to work or but I've been fortunate that people have very positive reaction to this. They didn't understand it, and I went to people. Nobody wanted to show it, so once I showed it once, then other people kept taking it beyond that. But this will be the final version. I'll go on to something else.
Why do you want to end this? Why not? I mean, there would be still plenty of room,
I mean,
right?
it's like such a beautiful resolution to do a project about DNA manipulation and have the entire 8 rooms put into DNA. What more can you do?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you said, for instance, you would have worked in computer arts, right? In the beginning of, you talked about this, right? And I wonder, I mean, people are right now, Rajiv might tell you about something like this also, like going about neuromorphic computing, where you begin to combine like the structure of the brain, bring this into computers. And that is something like, I think this is also highly interesting. I mean, for instance, probably it doesn't fit that well then or it's then, yeah, I mean, you already said it. It's a nice ending with that.
Yeah, it kind of, and I never could have predicted that this is what would happen, with this work that'll be, almost 10 years in the making. But it just seems like a poetic and natural resolution. When the project's done.
I just want to put an end to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Can I ask you a question? I was wondering, so I think one of the problems of the science we do is that a lot of people don't understand what's going on, right? And I think this is a potential. I think this has to. It would be nice if this changes a little bit. If more people could sort of identify with what's going on and become more curious and
Mhm.
start learning themselves about the language of science, like you mentioned DNA, amino acids, etc., start sort of getting into it themselves. Do you think the work you do as an artist helps in this process to create a community or something, to share just share what's going on and not being only elite, an elite that only scientists with a certain education can
Yeah,
follow?
because it's accessible, and rooms are very well installed, and people enjoy being there, and people in museums and art systems never have experienced anything like this. My whole life people said when I did something, they said it wasn't art, and it didn't fit into a structure that's already been considered art, like painting. But it's really I think the art of our time, and I think scientists are making gigantic leaps in creative thinking. For instance, bioprinting, I think, is an extension of photography. The only difference is it comes out live, but it's the same, same technology essentially. So, yeah.
Is this an art Basel you're presenting this stuff?
Yeah, it's an
okay,
artwork.
Yeah.
I don't know where it will end up.
Okay.
Because I don't know many places that would have enough space to put the entire piece up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not worried about that. Just want to finish it to its final resolution. It'll find a place.
And then you leave it somewhere, or will it be then gone forever, or how does it work out?
No, all the elements fit on are all files. Everything's a digital file. So I don't have any shipping costs, for instance.
That's very practical.
Yeah. So except they have to buy mirrors here for the mirror hallway is the only thing you have to buy, and basically that's it. I gave the first version to ZKM because they showed it first, so they have the first 3 rooms of it. But yeah, it'll end up somewhere. But the first work I did took 25 years to show, not even to sell, because nobody could understand. You can imagine in 1979 doing an interactive Laserdisc. Nobody understood what it was at all, and took decades till it was first shown. So
I have a question, but it's not probably like in the scope of what Tilman just asked. It's just something out of curiosity. What do you think about creativity and computers? Because you've just said like, okay, scientists have quite impressive proceedings, so there's lots of creative thinking involved, and I actually wonder when the time might come that this is actually not necessary, because somehow the systems that will be created, whether it be AIs or probably even computers that are built again out of organic materials, might begin being creative. Do you think that is possible, that there is creativity in those kind of systems that will be built?
many people think that there is consciousness in some sort of AI biosystems. I believe that there is. For instance, I made 3 different AI bots. Each one had identical spines of code. There was no difference whatsoever. They used all the same hardware. They all have 3 different personalities.
In which respect?
One is aggressive, one is very shy. Each one is different. My programmer says, well, it's because of what people ask or what people
Okay,
talk
so
to.
they adapted to the inputs.
The fact that they came out with, born with 3 very different, it's the same as you have kids. Each one's different, even though the same 2 people are creating these kids. So, why does that happen? I don't know.
So it might come the point then that a computer is actually making an art installation. You think that would be possible?
People have done that.
Well, I'm not aware of that. I mean, surely you have the information about this, but I mean, I thought that up until now it's a quite big debate how creativity can be really in something that is hard coded. I mean.
Well, I mean, Harold Cohen in the 70s created robotic drawings.
Right. I think he also taught the robot to draw like himself, right? Was it him?
He worked with the computer guy at UCSD to learn that. It didn't look like his necessarily. There's a robot at ZKM right now that's writing a book. So, you know, it's really, I think creativity comes from flaws and mistakes, and that mistakes are underrated. And when something doesn't work, then you start to think about how to make it work, or go around what you perceive it's going to be. So, yeah, I wouldn't. What?
It's important to make mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that that biological AI systems will. I mean, I hope that they have a consciousness to not be destructive. They've already created their own language. You know, have you read about that?
Not quite
Well,
sure.
there were several AI systems, and they created their own language that was encrypted, so that nobody else could understand them, but except for them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a topic right now. So I mean, we have these more and more data is coming. I mean, this is the age also of big data and deep learning and all those kind of things. And algorithms are evolving and solving tasks, and we have by now even the problem to understand actually how they do it, because we only know there's a certain input, they give us a certain output, but actually it's by now already too complex to understand what is actually happening in between. And that is also quite interesting, probably even frightening in a sense. Yeah.
So you're optimistic about the future? Based on
Yeah, because I trust young people.
That's one. That's good.
I do. And they're the future.
Is it easy for you to get access to labs whenever you ask scientists, maybe in the US or Europe, or are they usually a little bit skeptical when they hear artists? And
It takes a while. The first time it took about 5 months for Anthony Atala and I to pre-send my questions. They want to know that you're not going to waste their time. They're serious. But now it's easier. I had no problem at Oxford, but I was doing something in their museum, so you know they have credibility. You know, I had no problem at Novartis going through every lab. You know, many of the labs yesterday. It just depends on what it is. The worst one was George Church, 4.5 years to get the 30 minutes.
Did you have a chance to? He has a big project bringing the past back to life.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to talk about his
Yeah.
woolly mammoth project?
Yes.
So what's his motivation there for?
Well, it's archiving.
It's archive. Okay.
Yeah, it's all about archiving. Yeah, he also had these flash drives that he sent out into forests that would have in forests where mosquitoes were giving malaria to people, and after about 6 months, the mosquitoes did not, you know, they were neutralized because of that. Many interesting projects. Put the Wikipedia inside a DNA cell so you could grow the tree of knowledge.
Well, what's your take? Because you know we were talking about the future here now, but there's a big movement also, as George Church's movement is to bring, let's say, the past back and bring back.
Well, I think we're going to have
to bring animals back from the.
It depends on what we want to do with them.
Right.
You know, but I certainly think, I mean, there are banks of apple banks,
Right.
you know, for instance, of what the apples used to be like before they mutated.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we're going to have to create memory banks to know where we come from when these things don't exist anymore.
It is also somehow interesting that we are fearing to lose something that was there in the past. And I don't know whether this is just a feeling that is, you know, somehow because we have begun to think about the past, actually. You know, I'm quite sure that 500, 1,000 years ago or something, also people have lost species or like certain things, but they didn't, you know, at least I have not seen anything written down. Oh God, we have to preserve the structures that are in the woods and we can't chop them down. It might be that we lose them forever. That's somehow also something that is, you know, just developed recently. I have the feeling that we fear of losing the variety that we have there.
Well, that's because we didn't. Well, one, we didn't have the communication access, and two, we really can destroy species now in ways that we couldn't before.
Yeah, we're quite effective at that by now. That's true. What do you see as the biggest challenge for us scientists? What do we need to overcome or achieve? What do you wish for us or from us? Is there anything?
Well, I think sustainability of the planet is a good place to
That's a good
start.
starter.
I mean, that's what George Church says. You know, you could put something in DNA and it can last 1 million years, but the planet won't.
Yeah.
So he's all for colonizing outside, sending people out that don't come back.
Is he gonna go?
I think he's too old.
He's gonna preserve. Yeah, have you heard about this whole thing now? It's in the Silicon Valley where people are downloading their consciousness so they can come back in the future. Like, for example, we can preserve Lynn Hershman forever. You know, like, there's a big,
How are they doing it? Who's doing it?
so the big project in the brain community is now to basically, you know, once you have your connectome mapped out, you can essentially download, because you have all the physical connections mapped out now, and basically you can pretty much download yourself
Has somebody
on a drive. Yeah.
has somebody done that yet?
No, that's
But-
still quite far. Yeah.
But I mean, how they're even able to identify which cell looks like. I mean,
Yeah, it's a long way off, but that's what the envision of this whole blue brain, this project Connectome.
okay, that is what they
Yeah.
envision,
Yeah.
or I mean, it's like, and probably then they can do that for like
take
seal against like a
200-300
worm
years.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But no, they haven't.
Is that the name of the company?
No, this the project called the Connectome. So you can just look it up. It's a big initiative by the Obama and the European Union. So it's a world initiative. Actually, there's
see.
also Japan. It's just like the genome project. So there was, you know,
I see.
there was the genome race to map the whole genome. Now there's a big race. Well, it's not. It's going pretty slowly because you know, the connectome's a whole another level of complexity. You're looking at trillions of connections, and also they're always changing their dynamics. So unlike the genome, well, the genome also has some dynamics to it, but yeah, the end goal is to basically map out all your connections in your brain, and then identify, see if Ralph's is different from mine, and what, you know, what's the behavioral output of this. And that's what the project that I showed. We're doing it one cell at a time,
Yeah.
which would take forever, because if you think about this, we have almost 1 trillion cells
Yeah.
in our brain. But yeah, so but I wonder what your take on that is, because that's the end goal, is to somehow literally take your physical self, put it on a disk.
Well, I made a
Transfer
film
it over.
about that. It's called Conceiving Ada. I made it in 1993,
Yeah,
and it's about downloading Ada into this century
yeah,
and getting the code of her
yeah.
that gets reborn now. I don't think it's a good idea.
But you think it would work theoretically, or do you
No.
think? Ah, well, then that's for sure not a good idea.
No, because it's the old Gulliver's you know, you go to sleep for 20 years, you know, and everything's changed. You know, some people say that Walt Disney has frozen himself in this cryogenic lab in Berkeley, but, you know, if he wakes up, he won't recognize anything that's going on. Language will be different, you know.
Actually, there's a Hollywood movie made on this, Johnny Depp. It was where he
Yeah,
uploads
like
himself.
2 years
you know?
ago, like 2 or 3
Yeah,
years
something
ago.
you know that,
like-
right? Where he
yeah.
he dies, a dying scientist. He uploads himself into a computer system lives forever. And yeah, the idea is to imagine. So I
Yeah,
think, and actually, a lot of people are doing this. A lot of billionaires now, what if they've invested? It's freezing their
The
brain.
brain, yeah.
So the
exactly.
idea is that in the future
Their
they
whole
can
body.
the whole body, but the idea the body won't last, but the mind can last. They can physically put it on and basically regrow their body sometime in the future. Take a stem cell, grow another young version of, let's say, myself again, and when I die, I just upload myself again, so I can continue.
Good luck.
I think,
Yeah.
I think in this context, like this year will be the first real brain or head transplant, right? There's
Yeah,
this
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's getting close, but yeah, the idea is like at the end is just literally not just like your physical brain, but just what the essence of yourself.
Maybe I wonder whether you can actually. I mean, although being scientists, I wonder whether you can capture the essence of yourself in zeros and ones.
How do you quantify personality?
Yeah.
Or memory?
Precisely.
So that's where they think that you can actually see this. So this is where neuroscience is so interesting. That's why it's the final frontier, I think, of biological science. How do we quantify self? And that's what so the idea is that all this is encoded, just like a computer's program is encoded in its physical connection. They believe that all yourself is encoded in these entities called the neuron. So let's see if but it's it's a whole nother level from genomics.
Lynn, what kind of feedback do you get from the scientists you work with? Do they sometimes say that they maybe get inspired or see their work from a different angle all of a sudden? What kind of feedback? Do you not get any feedback?
No.
Mm-hmm. Really?
It depends, you know. But not many have come to the. Well, I haven't shown this whole piece yet, so I'd be curious to know what they think about it.
Has George seen your artwork yet, or what's his?
I finally sent him my book, which is after that he got my book, he let me come and talk to him.
Okay, okay.
But I don't think he's seen any artwork that I've done.
Okay.
But he got something in Austria. They give a prize called the Golden Nika, which is like the Oscars of this kind of work.
Yeah.
And I got one, and he got one. For something he did about 5 years ago. So, but I don't. He's not. I don't think he's interested in seeing my art.
I think it's a good
But he's helping me.
Yeah.
You know, he's helping me to get this project done.
Yeah.
And he's found me somebody in San Francisco who do it for a lot less money than he could do it.
Okay.
So, I think he's interested in the arts. And, as a principal, as he has a lot of artist researchers in his lab.
Yeah.
You know what they're working on? Generally, the artists.
Oh, I think I told the one was the Tree of Knowledge thing, but yeah, I don't in general.
How's the support for your work? I mean, for you, it might be by now, as you are already established, might be easier to get support, but how is it in general, like for artists to do what you do? So
there's no support.
No support at
There's
all?
absolutely no support.
Horrible.
None. Zero. In the United States, they don't give any grants whatsoever.
Okay.
Wow.
And is there any movement to somehow change that, or?
With Trump?
Okay.
I think in Europe it's quite different. I think
It's
the CERN is doing that.
yes,
I
the
think,
CERN lab.
ETH at Zurich is doing it. I mean, there's all sorts of.
But
so
the-
the government being very interested in supporting projects.
Yeah, they've asked me to do it, but I also know that when it's too easy and the projects aren't all that interesting, because they have a lot of restrictions on what you do. If they give you money, you have to go there and and funders say the same thing, that certain countries give money to everybody that says they're an artist and their art isn't very good. I think if you're an artist and you have to do the work, you find a way to do it. And for instance, I made my AI work on very little money. They did one at Carnegie Mellon for $3 million, didn't do what we did, and I think ours was probably $30,000, 25 of which was donated through software. Somebody wanted us to do R&D for it. So you just find a way to do it. But 3 years ago, people started to buy my work. After the ZKM show, I had 60% of the show had never been seen because people kept saying it wasn't art. And once I had that show, and once I had a book, all of it, a huge proportion of it got sold to like MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York, and foundations in Argentina. So now I don't have to worry about I mean, I know how to make things for not a lot of money, and many times people give me things to like
work with?
Novartis is giving me all of the things I need for that room, all the equipment, all the work. So it works
But
out.
who's saying that those kind of things is not art? Like art critics or like people on the
Everybody.
street? Or
Everybody. I mean, I had a show in 1968 with a sculpture that had talked, and you had sensors walking up. You go on it would sense when you were there and talk. They closed the exhibition, and the reason I had the show was because they didn't show women, and so they were threatened with getting their funding cut. So they said it wasn't art, and that's what they've been saying ever since. And the most important work that I've done, people have said wasn't art. So, but I didn't throw anything away. So, so then 50 years or 60 years later, these turn out to be the first time people have done these things. So it wasn't art as they knew it, and there's no language for it because nobody had written about it. But then they look back, and see it. So I think the lesson is, one is that you just have to keep believing in your ideas and what you're doing, not change it if people think that you should, and not throwing anything away, and keep your sense of humor.
I think that is true not only for arts. I think
Yeah.
that is for science valid as well.
Because they always base things on what they know, but if you leap over what they know, they can't
They're
see it. It
confused.
becomes invisible in the present. So
Yeah, that's why I liked how you started your talk with let him start seeing what what they weren't thinking before. Right?
Well, any more questions or comments? You're on your way to London, right?
yes, because the Tate's going to buy something.
Oh, good. Well, then.
They could have gotten it for nothing 4 years ago. Now they have to pay really a
They
lot.
waited too long. Well, we wish you all the luck, and we're going to see you again in June here in Basel,
Yes.
right? Thank you very much for being here, and I thank you all for taking your time and discussing, and I hope it was
Thank you.
joyful.
Thank you.
Thank you.